The council transport arrived to collect them, but the humans had left something permanent behind. The void beacon continued broadcasting, and the listening posts established by other species remained active. The trial site had been transformed into the galaxy's first interdimensional cultural center. Captain Vasquez, Counselor Vixani said as they prepared to depart, "I must ask, how did you know that creating civilization in the void was possible?" Elena smiled as she looked back at the empty space that was no longer truly empty. "Because that's what humans do, Counselor. We make homes wherever we go. We create meaning wherever we are. We build civilizations out of whatever we have available, including nothing at all." The Void Trial became the first test in galactic history that was officially retired not because it was too dangerous, but because it had been transformed into something entirely different. The humans had proven that consciousness could not only survive in the ultimate isolation, but could use that isolation as raw material for creating new forms of civilization. The void between galaxies, once the most feared place in known space, became a destination for philosophers and anyone seeking to understand the true nature of consciousness. The humans had not just passed an impossible test, they had turned impossibility itself into a new frontier for exploration. And in the endless darkness between the stars, the void beacon continued to transmit, filling the emptiness with the sound of three humans who had discovered that home is not a place you find, but something you create wherever you choose to exist. Asterisk. But as the hours passed, it became clear that the humans were doing exactly that. They had created rituals, traditions, and routines that turned their tiny ship into a complete society. They held formal dinner parties where they discussed philosophy. They conducted scientific experiments using the unique properties of the void. They even established what they called void art creative works, inspired by the absolute emptiness around them, by the 18th hour. Something unprecedented began to happen. The humans' lighthouse transmissions had been broadcasting continuously, filling the void with human culture and thought. Other ships, stationed at the edges of the trial zone, began to detect the signals. "Sir," Veltar reported to Vixani, "we're receiving signals from the human vessel, but they're not distress calls. They're cultural transmissions. Art, music, literature, they're broadcasting human civilization into the void." Vixani's crystalline form flickered with confusion. They're supposed to be going insane. They're supposed to be begging for rescue. Instead, they're conducting a cultural exchange with emptiness itself. The humans were not just surviving the void. They were transforming it, masters of the void as. The trial entered its second day. The humans had accomplished something that challenged everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about consciousness and civilization. They had not merely survived the void, they had made it into something new. Elena woke up during the 24th hour to find Marcus and Sarah already awake, working on what they called the Culture Project. Sarah was recording detailed psychological observations while Marcus modified their transmitter to broadcast on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "Morning, Captain," Marcus said cheerfully, as if they were on a routine mission rather than suspended in the nothingness between galaxies. "I figured out how to boost our signal range. We can now transmit across a sphere approximately 1 light year in diameter." "Why would we want to do that?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Because," Sarah said, looking up from her notes, "we're not just passing the trial anymore. We're creating something that never existed before. A conscious presence in the void. We're proving that intelligence can create meaning anywhere." The realization hit Elena like a physical blow. The other species had failed the trial because they tried to bring their civilization with them into the void. The humans were succeeding because they were building new civilization inside the void itself. "Show me what you've built," Elena said. Over the past 12 hours, Marcus had transformed their ship into something that resembled a miniature city more than a spacecraft. Using spare parts, emergency supplies, and incredible ingenuity, he had created distinct areas for different activities. There was a library corner where Sarah kept her notes and recited literature. a music room where they performed concerts for their broadcast audience, a workshop where Marcus invented new tools and art pieces, an observation deck where they contemplated the philosophical implications of existing in nothingness. It's like we're building a society from scratch, Sarah explained. But instead of having land and resources, we're building it out of ideas and imagination. Their daily routine had evolved into something complex and beautiful. They held morning meetings to discuss their discoveries about the void. They conducted scientific experiments on the psychological effects of absolute isolate. They created art inspired by the unique experience of existing in emptiness. They told stories that could only be conceived in a place where normal reality didn't exist. Most remarkably, they had established what they called void philosophy, a new way of thinking about consciousness and existence that could only develop in the complete absence of external stimuli. The void teaches us that consciousness is not just a response to the universe, Elena said during one of their broadcasts. Consciousness is something we create and share. It exists independently, matter and energy. It can create meaning and beauty even when there's nothing else around. By the 30th hour, their transmissions had grown so complex and rich that other species throughout the galaxy were beginning to take notice. The Council's monitoring stations were receiving requests from universities, philosophical societies, and cultural institutions asking for copies of the Human Void broadcasts. Sir, Reltar reported to Councillor Vixani, the humans' cultural transmissions are being studied by 17 different species. The University of Ceres has declared their void philosophy to be the most significant development in consciousness. Studies in the past millennium. Vixani was beyond bewildered. They're supposed to be dying of isolation. Instead, they're teaching the galaxy about consciousness. It gets stranger, sir. 3 different species have requested permission to build listening posts near the void zone so they can study the human transmissions directly. The humans had turned the ultimate test of mental endurance into the galaxy's most fascinating cultural event. During the 40th hour, something extraordinary happened. Marcus detected an incoming transmission on their communication array. It wasn't from the Council monitoring station. It was from a deep space research vessel belonging to the meditation masters of Kepler 442b. Human vessel, this is Deep Thought Station Alpha, came the transmission. We have been studying your void broadcasts with great interest. Your discoveries about consciousness in emptiness align with our own meditation practices. We request permission to establish a permanent listening post at the edge of your transmission range. Elena looked at her crew in amazement. They want to build a space station to listen to us think. Captain, Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. We're not just passing the trial. We're creating the galaxy's first void-based civilization. We're proving that consciousness can create culture anywhere. The next 12 hours brought a flood of similar requests. The crystalline architects wanted to study their void construction techniques. The harmonic composers were fascinated by their music created in silence. The dream weavers were intrigued by their stories told in emptiness. By the 50th hour, the humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had created a civilization that existed purely in the realm of consciousness and culture, with no physical infrastructure except their tiny ship. They had proven that intelligence could not only survive in nothingness, but could transform nothingness into something meaningful. Council Station. This is Captain Vasquez, Elena reported during the regular check-in. We're approaching the final phase of our trial, and we'd like to make a proposal. A proposal? Vexani's voice carried a mixture of fascination and disbelief. We'd like to request that the Void trial be permanently converted into a cultural exchange program. We've proven that consciousness can create civilization anywhere. Now we'd like to invite other species to join us in exploring what that means. The council chamber fell silent for a long moment. Finally, Vexani responded. Captain, you do realize that you've already passed the trial? You've survived longer than any previous attempt, and you've done so while maintaining perfect psychological health. With respect, counselor, Elena replied, we think we've done something more important than just passing a test. We think we've discovered a new way for conscious beings to exist in the universe. The final 22 hours of the trial became a celebration of consciousness itself. The humans continued their broadcasts, but now they were joined by listening. Posts established by 12 different species. The void, which had been the site of 73 failures, became the galaxy's most active center for philosophical and cultural exchange. Marcus had built a permanent installation that he called the Void Beacon, a powerful transmitter that could broadcast human culture across vast distances. Sarah had completed a comprehensive study of consciousness in isolation that would become required reading at universities throughout the galaxy. Elena had established protocols for what she called void diplomacy, a new form of interspecies communication based on pure cultural exchange. When the 72nd hour arrived, marking the official end of the trial, the humans made one final transmission. To all beings throughout the galaxy, Elena spoke into the transmitter. We've learned that consciousness is not something that requires a universe full of stars and planets. Consciousness is something we create and share with each other. It can exist anywhere, even in the emptiness between galaxies. The void is not empty if thinking beings choose to fill it with thought and culture and art and love. The impossible challenge. The Galactic Council had administered the void trial for over 2,000 standard years. It was their most feared test, designed to break the minds of even the strongest species. The concept was devastatingly simple. Take a small crew to the space between galaxies, where no stars shine and no planets exist. Then see if they could survive 72 hours in complete isolation from all civilization. Counselor Lexani floated in. His observation chamber, his crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy as he reviewed the failure records. 73 species had attempted the trial. 73 had failed in ways that still haunted the Council's collective memory. The Krillian Collective, a hive mind spanning billions of individuals, had lasted only 18 hours before their mental network collapsed under the weight of absolute emptiness. Their ship had been found drifting, its crew catatonic, their shared consciousness shattered like glass. The ethereal luminants, beings of pure energy who had mastered the manipulation of matter itself, had dispersed into nothingness. After 31 hours, their final transmission spoke of being absorbed by the void, their individual identities lost to the infinite darkness. Even the titanium shells, a species that had evolved in the crushing depths of gas giant cores and possessed minds like fortified bunkers, had succumbed after 45 hours. They had gone completely insane, their unbreakable psyches fractured by the simple absence of everything they had ever known. Now, incredibly, the humans wanted to attempt a trial. Vexaniasaid. A young diplomatic officer named Veltar approached with visible concern. Counselor, the human delegation has arrived. They're requesting immediate commencement of the trial. This is unfortunate, Vexani muttered, his form flickering with dismay. Humans are known to be intensely social creatures. They form bonds with other species, create art, build communities. How do they expect to survive in a place where none of that exists? The human delegation consisted of 3 individuals who had somehow convinced their government to send them on what every other species considered a suicide mission. Captain Elena Vasquez was a veteran space explorer with calm brown eyes and the kind of steady demeanor that suggested she had seen everything the universe could throw at her. Engineer Marcus Chen was younger, with quick hands and a mind that seemed to work 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Dr. Sarah Kim, their psychologist, had spent her career studying how minds adapt to extreme isolation. When they arrived at the council chambers, Elena stepped forward as their spokesperson. Counselor Vexani, we're honored by this opportunity to prove humanity's worthiness for galactic citizenship. Vexani's crystalline form pulsed with what humans might recognize as sympathy. Captain Vasquez, you must understand what you're asking. The Void Trial takes place in a region of space that exists between our galaxy and the Andromeda Galaxy. There are no stars, no planets, no cosmic radiation, no background energy. It is the closest thing to absolute nothingness that exists in our universe. We understand the parameters, Elena replied calmly. Do you? Vexani's voice carried the weight of centuries. The ethereal luminants were beings of pure thought and energy. They could create matter from nothing, bend reality to their will. The void drove them to dissolution. The Krillian collective shared the minds of billions, never truly alone. The emptiness severed their connections and left them broken. What makes you think 3 humans can succeed where they failed? Dr. Sarah Kim stepped forward. Because we're not trying to fight the void, counselor. We're trying to understand it. The council members exchanged glances that conveyed millennia of skepticism. Eltar spoke quietly to his superior. Should we try to dissuade them? Their deaths serve no purpose. They are determined, Vexani replied. We must honor their request, however futile. The journey to the void took 3 days aboard a council transport ship. Elena, Marcus, and Sarah spent the time in their assigned quarters, a small vessel that would be their home for the trial. The ship was equipped with basic life support, minimal food supplies, and communication equipment that would allow the council to monitor their inevitable breakdown as they approached the trial zone. The view outside their windows gradually changed. The scattered stars of the galactic rim grew fewer and dimmer. The cosmic background radiation faded. The familiar glow of nebulae and distant galaxies disappeared entirely. Soon they were surrounded by perfect infinite blackness. Beginning final approach to void coordinates, announced the transport pilot, his voice carefully neutral. Initiating disconnect procedures in 10 minutes. Marcus was already at his engineering station, checking systems for the 3rd time. Life support is stable. Emergency beacon is armed. All systems are functioning within normal parameters. Sarah had her psychological monitoring equipment active, taking baseline readings of their stress levels and brain activity. Everyone's vitals are normal. We're as ready as we can be. Elena looked out at the absolute darkness surrounding them. Council transport, this is Captain Vasquez. We're ready to begin the trial? Understood, Captain, came Vexani's voice through the communication system. You have 72 hours from the moment we disconnect. May fortune favor you, though I fear it will not be enough. The transport ship released their vessel and immediately jumped to hyperspace, leaving the 3 humans alone in the void between galaxies. The silence was immediate and absolute. No cosmic radiation created static on the receivers. No distant stars provided reference points. No gravitational fields tugged at their ship. They were suspended in perfect nothingness. For the first hour, they followed their planned routine. Elena maintained ship systems and communications. Marcus conducted engineering checks. Sarah monitored their psychological state and recorded observations. It was almost normal, except for the view outside their windows, which showed absolutely nothing. This is weird, Marcus said during their 2nd hour, staring out at the emptiness. It's not just dark. It's like looking at the absence of everything. The human eye is designed to see light, Sarah explained, making notes on her tablet. When there's literally no light to see, our brains try to fill in the gap. Some people see colors that aren't there. Others see shapes in the darkness. What about you, Elena? Marcus asked. Seeing anything out there? Elena continued her system checks without looking up. I see an opportunity. An opportunity? Sarah looked curious. For what? To build something new. Elena finally turned away from her control panel. Every other species that attempted this. Trial tried to survive the void. They treated it as something to endure, like a storm or a disease. But what if we're thinking about it wrong? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Wrong how? What if the void isn't a test of survival? What if it's a test of creation? Over the next few hours, Elena's idea began to take shape. Instead of simply maintaining, their ship and waiting for the trial to end, they began to actively use their time in the void. Marcus started disassembling non-essential equipment to build what he called a lighthouse, a powerful transmitter that could send signals across the empty space. What's the point of a lighthouse with no ships to guide? Sarah asked as she watched Marcus work. Every lighthouse starts with no ships, Alina replied. The ships come later. By the 8th hour, they had established a pattern that would have amazed the watching council members. Instead of falling into depression or madness, the humans had created structure in the emptiness. They established regular meal times, work shifts, and recreation periods. They told stories, sang songs, and shared memories of Earth. Sarah discovered that the void had unexpected psychological effects. Without external stimuli, our minds become more active, not less, she reported to her recording device. We're creating our own reality through conversation and imagination. Marcus had completed his lighthouse project by the 10th hour. The device was essentially a powerful radio transmitter that could broadcast across the void using their ship's main power supply. What should we transmit? He asked. Everything, Alina said simply. Art, music, literature, philosophy. Everything that makes us human. They began broadcasting immediately. Elena read poetry into the transmitter. Marcus hummed classical music while he worked. Sarah recited philosophical texts from memory. They took turns sharing stories from their childhood, their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for humanity's future. The 12th hour marked the point where previous species had begun to show signs of psychological stress. The humans were not only stable, but increasingly energetic. They had transformed their small ship into something resembling a cultural center. Marcus had rigged lights to create different rooms for various activities. Sarah had established a meditation space. Elena had created a small garden using their emergency food supplies. Council observation station. This is Captain Vasquez, Elena reported during their scheduled communication check. All crew members are healthy and morale is high. We're proceeding with planned activities. In the observation station, Counselor Vixani stared at the readings in disbelief. Their stress levels are actually decreasing, he said to Veltar. How is that possible? Sir, they're not just surviving the void. They're making it livable. That's impossible. The void is the absence of everything. You cannot make a home in nothingness.